Welcome to Does This Still Work? The podcast looks at old movies and asks, does this still work? I'm Joe Dixon.
And I'm George Romaka. And today we're discussing because our patrons voted for it and they must hate us so very much. Bad Lieutenant from 1992 and some historical context. First, podcasty stuff. You can reach us at dtswpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, Letterboxd, and our YouTube channel. Please tell your friends about us and leave 5-star ratings everywhere. You can pick what we watch and get extra per episode content by funding us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/dtswpod. Now, Joe, take your time in taking us back to 1992 because I really don't want to talk about this movie.
Actually, I have a question before we go back to 1992. Actually, I got a bunch of detours before we get to 1992, but this will be the first one. Have you been on our YouTube channel?
I set it up, so yes.
Yes, but have you been on it lately? I mean, I'm just curious what people are writing.
What do you mean, been on it?
Just look at what the comments. I haven't seen any. I'm just curious, have there been any of our films got any comments on them?
I don't know. We don't even have a lot of views.
Just curious. So please, go
Interestingly, Libsyn shows us the view counts, too, on YouTube.
Oh, I did not think to look there. Okay. Good to know. Before we go back to 1992, I want to recall a story I remember from 1987. It's New York City, a priest is murdered, and the town is in shock. Who would murder a priest? All the newspapers howled. Talk radio was really hot back then, and this really upped the vitriol about how crime was out of control and how savages walked the city streets.
That means black people.
I believe it does. And Hispanics. Don't forget Hispanics.
Oh, yeah.
But things hit an even higher pitch of hate when the priest murderer was arrested, and it turned out the murderer was a teenage black man.
I wish I had a sound effect for the clutching of pearls.
You can well imagine how that went over. And so you had a black man killing a white priest in the racial powder keg that was New York City in the mid-'80s. Eventually, though, and this is as I remember it, this story, which started out as a headline news, gradually got smaller and smaller and smaller coverage. And indeed, when the case came to trial, it was barely noted that the black guy was acquitted. Can anybody guess why all of a sudden the news media seemed to lose their appetite for this murder? If you're around then and old enough to remember, you'll know that the priest had picked this 17-year-old up in the park and offered him $10 for sex. The young man insisted he shot the priest because his holy father would not let him out of the car after their encounter. Yes, that's not Bad Lieutenant story, but that's what I flashed back to when I rewatched this movie, and that's what I thought of when I first saw this film in the theaters 30 years ago. I should say, some people thought it was pure homophobia that led to the acquittal of the killer, but I don't know that from reading the news on the proceedings. All I remember is that a grown man was trying to or did sexually assault a teenager. Sorry about the detour, but this is the history section, and that's my history. Any thoughts, my friend?
Was it really? It just feels like we've always known that priests were creeps.
Oh, no, my friend. I can assure you, there was no way you could have on a television or a movie or even in the proceedings of a story anything bad about a priest or minister. The Archbishop, when I was growing up, was Cardinal O'Connor, right-wing creep. You had to treat that man like he was yet another New York politician, big-time politician. I mean, I don't even know who the Archbishop is these days. But back then, don't make the Archbishop mad. He doesn't like it if you do that. Oh, don't come out for this. Just, I can assure you, it has not been from forever that we always known priests were creeps. Some people definitely knew, but most of society did not.
Hey.
Okay, now on to 1992. Crime was actually down in New York City in the 90s, but in Harlem, at this time, a gram of powdered cocaine sold anywhere from $20 to $25. A kilo could go for $16,000 to $18,000. These were discounted prices, very low for the time, and all you had to do to pay these prices that were insane was to go to the 3rd Police Precinct where cops were selling drugs they stole from drug dealers. Known as Nannery's Raiders, Sergeant Kevin Nannery led a crime syndicate consisting of 33 officers and likely more who would go booming. Booming was making bogus radio calls while a cop broke into a known drug dealer's home and grabbed cash and drugs, selling drugs right out of the station house at half the market price.
See, I want to see, Gen Z cops reclaim the term booming, but it means that they go raid boomers' homes for evidence that they were involved in the January 6th attempted takeover of the government or something.
You know, I would tell you should tweet that out, but no one knows what booming is unless they know this case, so it won't matter.
And also, I deleted my Twitter.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. And you also deleted your Twitter. That's right. Everybody, George is no longer Twitter. You can no longer harass him. If you were.
I wasn't even getting that much attention.
Even though the Dirty 30 started in 1992, the first arrest for these crimes by the DEA didn't happen until 1994. That means my source for this isn't the local papers, but Wikipedia. Overall, these criminal cops were tried for extortion, possession and distribution of narcotics, civil rights violations, and of course perjury, since once captured, some of these pigs lied under oath. Now, don't just think the police only ransacked homes. Sometimes they would threaten to do their job unless a corner drug dealer threw some bucks their way. This Wikipedia entry has a pull quote from the New York Times, and I'll quote from that. A squad car would pull up to a corner where the guys were working and just sit there, the investigator said. Business had to halt. Sooner or later, one of the guys would start talking, feeling out the officer. Maybe they could work something out. Maybe the cop should stop by a certain bodega. The cop goes away. He doesn't bother the corner again. At the end of the week, he goes to the bodega and gets his money. End quote. Any thoughts, my friend?
That tracks?
You don't think law enforcement has changed in these? This is 1992. Surely this doesn't happen today.
Not for the better.
You see, the problem is Black Lives Matter failed to pay off the cops. That's why we have this. If more black people simply just paid off law enforcement, we wouldn't have these issues. Our final story was reported at the time. George, read this headline from the New York Daily News about that time the Police Benevolent Association had a riot.
Can I just say I hate the title of the Police Benevolent Association? It's just funding fascists. It's funding the care and feeding of fascists.
You don't think it's particularly benevolent?
No, I don't think it's particularly benevolent. I don't think anything about our police system is particularly benevolent. PBA storms City Hall. 10,000 rage at Dave.
The Dave they are talking about is New York City's first black mayor, David Dinkins. You might have asked what David Dinkins could have done to make all those cops so mad.
Be black?
Well, that didn't help either, but did he slash the police budget? No. Did he take away sick days? No. So what was it?
Did he sleep with their wives?
Well, that would have probably also done it, but no, George. Here's what he did. He proposed that we have an independent civilian complaint review board to investigate police misconduct.
As we will learn in the Batman movies over the next 2 weeks, spoiler alert, accountability is the enemy of law enforcement.
That is correct. Also correct is law enforcement got so insulted at the suggestion that they should be investigated for misconduct that they went out and engaged in misconduct.
Color me shocked.
That misconduct included, but was not limited to, assaulting civilians, public intoxication, spewing racial slurs, carrying racist signs, and blocking traffic. All that ignored by other cops called to control the first set of cops. Can you believe it, George?
Yes, I 100%
can believe it. I will quote from the article. Chanting, "Dinkins must go," the demonstrators blew through the police barricades securing City Hall and swarmed the front steps, where they denounced the mayor for proposing changes to the board. Uniformed officers working the demonstration did nothing to stop the rush, moving barricades aside as the first wedge of demonstrators pushed its way through. End quote. Mayor Dinkins will go on to say about this hooliganism, quote, "If some officers in full view of a camera and public and their superiors officers would use racial slurs yelling and some of the signs they were carrying, I fear how they would behave when they are out in the streets." End quote. Yeah, I would imagine they are probably worse when all those things aren't there. I think Dave was onto something.
Mm-hmm.
Two mayors would be at that riot. One was Eric Adams, who would go on to be the second black mayor of New York City.
And who learned all of the wrong lessons during that time.
Indeed, but here he was right. In 1992, he was a black police officer, and after the riot, he and other black officers called for an independent investigation. They had no faith in the DA pursuing this case, and since no officer went to jail, I would say he got that one right.
Mm-hmm. What's he doing about it now that he's mayor?
Not a goddamn thing.
Nope, sure is not.
The other future mayor there was actually a riot ringleader. Rudy Giuliani was in full fash mode as he cheered on the non-lawful before they rushed City Hall. So this was his first January 6th, you might say.
It was his practice run.
His practice run. George, have you ever heard of the PBA riot?
I had not heard of the PBA riot, but again, and I cannot stress this enough, I am not surprised.
Well, Twitter PBA, occasionally someone quotes them, because I'm not following them online, but someone will quote them, and it's saying the most inflammatory, crazy stuff. Just, their rhetoric is always way past 12, you know what I'm saying? If on a scale of 1 to 10, they're in 13. Just crazy stuff. And so in one sense, I get why this person's representing the police, because I'm sure he's an accurate depiction of them. At the same time, you're talking to the public, maybe cool it a bit? Let's give the delusion that you're actually professional.
No, they don't want to do that. They want to reach out to the most extreme, volatile, and most likely. Everything on that side of the political aisle is stochastic terrorism. They are saying all of the inflammatory things in the hopes that the one loose cannon is going to grab their gun and do something. They all want that to happen.
Perhaps so. Okay, George, tell us about Bad Lieutenant.
Do I have to?
Yeah, sort of. It is kind of what we do on the show.
It is. This was written and directed by Abel Ferrara, and also written by Zoe Lund.
And I know Abel Ferrara from The Funeral. Good movie. And I know Zoe Lund from absolutely nothing.
Me neither. Blurbs, IMDb says, while investigating a young nun's rape, a corrupt New York City police detective with a serious drug and gambling addiction tries to change his ways and find forgiveness and redemption. No, he doesn't. He doesn't try to change anything about himself. He does ask for forgiveness at some point, but it's too late.
Well, is it too late?
We'll find out. Amazon says, a disturbing character study of a corrupt New York City cop's slide into insanity. While telling us actually nothing about the movie, I love that blurb because it accurately portrays this movie as disturbing.
Well, it's certainly correct that it is a character study, and a disturbing character study, sure. And he is a corrupt cop. Only thing I would object to is his slide into insanity. I wouldn't say he's insane. I think he's a creep, but I don't think he's insane.
I wouldn't say he slid into insanity. I would say he started there.
Yeah, I mean, how rational or sane could you be if you decide, well, he is a cop, though.
Yeah.
But he brings out cocaine at his kids right out there in the window. Anyone can look in and him snorting away after he drops his kid off at school.
I mean, it was, the early 90s, late 80s. Everybody was doing key bumps in their car after they dropped their kids off.
That's perhaps true.
So this film takes place during a fictional, ambiguous week or so, somewhere between 1988 and 1991. A through line in this film is the protagonist betting on the MLB National League playoffs. The film opens with rolling credits on a white screen while a radio announcer describes the Mets being 3-0 in the series. The announcer references the Oakland A's coming back from a 3-0 in 1989. Later, we'll learn that the Mets are against the LA Dodgers for this playoff series. Also, this movie heavily features Darryl Strawberry playing for the LA Dodgers, which he didn't start doing till 1990. The film also references the Mets winning the World Series in 1986, which is not only the only sports fact that I didn't have to look up when writing this paragraph, it's probably the only sports fact I know, period. This film has to take place after 1986 and before 1992 when it was released. The only time between 1986 and 1992 that the Mets faced the Dodgers in the playoffs was 1988. Do the results of the playoffs match up with what the movie will say they were? No, but I can't care that much because I'm really stalling because I don't want to write this summary because I don't want to think about this movie at all.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The film must think that some baseball fans are going to see this, but directing this film at me or someone who just went to see this picture, all that baseball stuff went over my head. I don't know. Did they play at that? I guess so. It made no difference. I didn't care. Okay, sure, they're in the World Series then. All right, I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't follow baseball. I have no idea.
So we meet our protagonist as he leaves his home and gets into his car. Shortly, he's joined by his two sons, who are running late to their Catholic school. They blame their aunt, who lives with them, for hogging the bathroom. Their father, the lieutenant, gives them just the best advice on how to handle this.
Hey, listen to me. I'm the boss, not Aunt Wendy. When it's your turn to use the bathroom, you tell Aunt Wendy to get the fuck out of the bathroom. What are you, men or mice? She's hogging the bathroom. Call me, I'll throw her the fuck out.
They're children, that's what they are. I said, get the fuck out, sure. But this is how you used to talk to your kids, right, George?
All the time, Joe. All the time. If they were not hitting their mother, I hit them. That's now your ringtone. Once his kids are safely out of the car, he does a key bump from the vial in his pocket. The lieutenant is played by Harvey Keitel, who we've seen for the show in Taxi Driver, Apocalypse Now, The Last Temptation of Christ, Thelma and Louise, and Pulp Fiction.
And I've seen him in, a film I'm sure he does not have on his resume, Mother, Jugs, and Speed. I also seen him in Reservoir Dogs and The Irishman.
And I've seen him in Sister Act, Rising Sun, From Dusk Till Dawn, U-571, Little Nicky, National Treasure, and Inglourious Bastard.
Oh my God, yes, I also seen him in Inglourious Bastard. I forgot that. Hey, what is U-571? Is it about a ship or something?
Yeah, it's about a submarine.
Huh. Does he look good in the sailor outfit, or is he not a sailor in that?
I don't remember that at all, but I think it was a pretty good movie.
Never heard of it.
From there, the lieutenant goes to work. He shows up at a crime scene. 2 white women in the front seats of a car shot in the head. He takes all of a minute to ask if anyone saw anyone. Then he wanders over to a car with more cops in it and convinces them to bet on the Mets.
Now, I'm not wrong in this, am I? Nothing relates back to that, does it?
To this shooting, no.
No, okay.
He goes to a diner to get some coffee because I guess he needs something to smooth out the time between his key bumps. Then, from a payphone, he places a large bet against the Mets, saying that the Dodgers are a lock. Across the street, he watches a black man break into car trunks and steal whatever he finds. The lieutenant does nothing about that.
Well, you approve of that sort of behavior, don't you? I mean, it's just property crime.
No, I don't approve of that kind of behavior.
I mean, what's the big deal? They're taking they can buy their items. I mean, come on. Lieutenant's got better things to do. He's got to place a bet, for God's sake. You know, long take paperwork. Let the man take a few things out of the trunk.
I had my entire car stolen. The cops did shit.
They're like the bad lieutenant. It all comes full circle.
The lieutenant jogs towards a group of drug dealers who happily scatter. He chases one, JC, into an apartment building. In the hallway, the lieutenant catches up and hands JC an evidence bag full of coke. He takes a moment to smoke some crack.
She's gonna kill you, man.
The fuck are you, a drug counselor? Or a drug dealer?
Why not both? .gif. JC says he'll have the lieutenant's money in a few days. JC is played by Vincent Laresca,
who I've seen in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Money Train, and I Like It Like That.
Baby, baby.
I like it like that.
And I've seen him in Romeo plus Juliet, The Devil's Advocate, The Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, and The Amazing Spider-Man. The lieutenant shows up in an apartment where he keeps a pet woman, Ariane, who has a friend over, Bote. She says it's Egyptian. After some small talk, they all do lines, champagne, and dance around, getting less and less stressed. At least, that's what I saw when I rented it on YouTube so I could watch it 2 times speed to write this. On Amazon, it skips all of that to the girls engaging in some light BDSM while the lieutenant sloppily drinks. Then, we are exposed to Harvey Keitel dancing and crying while fully frontally nude.
What'd you think? Were you impressed?
No. I mean, I was kind of impressed at his crying.
I was impressed by his abs. I'm like, oh, this dude's kind of in shape.
Okay, I don't know if Kit's going to want me to say this on air, but I'm going to say it anyway. She wondered out loud how he could be so ripped and also have a dad bod.
Why would you not want to say that on air?
I don't know that she wants to acknowledge this movie exists at all, because she was there. This movie happened to her, too.
Right. You know, it's a good point, though, because it's true in a lot of films where people play drug dealers where they still look spectacular. Like, that was one of the downsides to Breaking Bad. Really good show. But Jesse's teeth are all perfect. It is nice and bright white. And this guy is a meth smoker. He's constantly smoking meth. He would not look that good.
Nope.
But then again, remember, we didn't know that you could snort up all that cocaine and still be fat. At least I didn't.
Yep.
With Philip Seymour Hoffman. So maybe Harvey Keitel just has the body for it.
Ariane is played by Robin Burrows, and Bote is played by Victoria Bestel. Somewhere within walking distance, the lieutenant happens upon a beat cop trying to break up an altercation between 2 black guys and an Asian deli owner who accuses them of stealing $500.
The first question I have is, what did they go around the counter? Because they stand there fighting with them, and yet they just take money out of, how are they standing where they are if they just stole money from the counter?
Good question, Joe.
If that's where they stole it, how'd you get $500?
The lieutenant tells the beat cop to take the owner in the back and take a statement, then tells the other 2 to give him the money. He fires his gun at nobody when they are hesitant. Then he tells the beat cop who came running because gunshot to take the owner down to the station to get a statement. Once clear, the two guys give him the money and he tells them to scram. Then the LT steals a bag of Oreos or something.
Yes, and the store owner's daughter sees him because she's just standing there looking right at him, and he goes, your daddy will be back. Let me steal this from you, though. Meantime, which, let's face it, it's probably not the first time a cop has walked in there and then walked out with something without paying.
But also, he just lets the two black guys go. Does that make him automatically not the worst cop ever?
No.
Okay.
It makes him not want to be inconvenienced by paperwork.
Fair.
And also, they'll tell that he took the $500, so just, get out of here.
The lieutenant's next stop is the second thing I could call a heroin spot that we've seen in the last few episodes. Here, Zoe, played by Zoe Lund, who co-wrote this movie, does all of the cooking and injecting so that the LT can just ride the high. And apparently, Zoe Lund just loved the heroin and was a vocal advocate for legalization. In 1999, she died of cocaine-related heart failure at 37.
Wow. Where'd you get that information?
Wikipedia.
Ah, okay.
And the IMDb trivia.
Ooh, that's not good. So she wasn't really acting, apparently. She really wasn't the heroine.
She loved the heroin.
Now, just to be clear, it's safe to say, neither one of us is, the hardest things we've ever done is alcohol and pot, right?
I've done salvia, but I don't necessarily think that that's any harder than pot.
Yeah, that's not harder than pot.
And I'm legally on amphetamines.
You're on legal amphetamines. You're not getting high from it.
Fair.
Well, I say all that just to say, so we don't know. Maybe heroin's great. Maybe cocaine's fantastic.
I would say this. All recreational drug use is an attempt at self-medication. If we had proper healthcare and proper healthcare services, recreational drugs would almost entirely go away.
Wow.
And they'd be limited to a much smaller pool of people who are doing them for thrill-seeking purposes, which could still be considered mental illness in a lot of cases.
That doesn't sound right because they have plenty of drug use in Canada. They have plenty of drug use in Sweden. They have plenty of drug use in the UK. A lot of these people have free health care, and people still love the heroin. It's not like there's no heroin there. And a lot of folks enjoy it. About roughly what they do here. Although I think meth is actually probably more popular worldwide.
I think free and proper are not the same thing.
Okay. I wonder what what is the most popular drug in the world now that I think about it? I think is it fentanyl? Fentanyl's very big with people in the Midwest,
alcohol.
apparently. That's correct. Yes, that's fair. Okay.
This next scene, I'm not going to linger on. It's slightly less than a minute of watching a nun get raped by two guys on the altar of a Catholic church. During the scene, we see a flash of Jesus on the cross writhing in agony.
Not helping, but writhing in agony.
Yes, this movie trips over the problem of evil. The nun is played by Frankie Thorne, who you will recognize from Billy Joel's music video for We Didn't Start the Fire.
Would I really?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you've seen it, maybe you would. Jesus is played by Paul Hipp.
Who I've seen in Face Off.
Yep.
Lethal Weapon 3.
Yep.
And The Funeral.
The lieutenant is woken up on his couch by his youngest toddler, who is watching anti-Nazi propaganda cartoons like a good girl, as the rest of the household comes together for breakfast. He's fairly oblivious to them, even as they reach out to him and ask him to be present.
By the way, I actually seen that cartoon. I was surprised. I don't know if I'd seen it at the time this movie came out, but I subsequently have seen it. It's actually a good cartoon.
Like I said, anti-Nazi propaganda, good stuff.
Remember when that wasn't controversial?
I know, right? At night, he's called to another homicide. The victim is a black man whose throat's been slashed in his car. A friendly hooker informs the lieutenant that there's a kilo of coke in the back seat, goes to retrieve it, and then drops it on the ground as he's trying to sneak it out of the car. He plays like it's nothing and tells another detective to put it in evidence.
Yeah, that probably ruined his evening.
Yep.
Wait, actually, he's going to sell the coke.
Still ruin his
Still
evening.
ruined his evening. He could use cash. Yeah.
From there, the lieutenant wanders to a parking garage where it's divulged that there is a $50,000 reward for the capture of the nun's rapists. The lieutenant, who considers himself a Catholic, has this one single thing that I can agree with him on to say.
The church is a racket.
How did I know that would be the quote? War's a racket, church is a racket, everything's a racket.
Out of an hour and a half of audio in this movie, I could get less than 2 seconds to be like, good point.
So why do you suppose he still considers himself a Catholic, if he feels that way? Or as a former Catholic himself, is that like a common thing? Just like, I hate Catholicism, but I'm still a Catholic?
It's institutional inertia. It's the same reason I'm a Mets fan.
It's more cultural than religious.
Yeah, I was born into a family of Mets fans. I was raised as a Mets fan. I grew up as a Mets fan, and I will die as a Mets fan. And if I ever root for the Yankees, I go to hell. Same thing. It's also revealed that the rapist stole a chalice from the altar, and that they'll probably try to pawn it off. And these are the same cops from before, so he convinces them all to bet on the Mets again. He's still placing his own huge bets on the Dodgers, so he's in the hole right now, but these guys don't know that. And the IMDb, plot synopsis for this is so just incorrect. That synopsis has him betting for the Mets the entire time. And he's not at all.
Nah.
Whoever wrote it didn't pay attention to the movie before they wrote it.
It's possible maybe AI wrote these things. It wouldn't be surprised to me. It just takes information from different places and put it in all on your page. So maybe someone wrote Mets, so they put Mets.
No, because people write these. I know because I've written a couple.
Okay. People could be AI. You don't know it.
No, that's not how people work.
I don't know.
Yes, you do.
You don't know who's a robot and who isn't.
You haven't even seen Battlestar Galactica. Don't even get me started.
I've seen the original Battlestar Galactica because I'm older than you.
But you didn't see the one where they look like people.
Nah, I didn't know them as Cylons. Never seen them as people.
Cylons look like people now.
Saw V, they look like people. And we found out that she wasn't a people when she opened her mouth and she put a rat down her throat. That was in V, TV show. You wouldn't be familiar with because you were probably not even born yet.
The lieutenant goes to the hospital. When a nurse won't let him into the nun's exam room, he uses some slimy misogynistic fear-mongering to get her to move. Then he opens the exam room door to see the nun naked in stirrups while a doctor describes the physical wounds and evidence of assault. The lieutenant stares at the nun for a bit and then closes the door.
What do you suppose that was about? At first, when I first saw this years ago, I thought, is he getting his jollies off watching this nun nude? But re-seeing it, that's not the vibe I got. But I didn't quite understand what it was I was seeing.
I don't know, and I don't care enough to know. This is just no.
Still, it's there for a reason. This seemed odd.
I think that's where your logic
to...
falls down. I don't think anything in this movie necessarily has a reason to be there.
Oh,
I mean, they all have causes to be there because there's a script and a director and a writer, and they were like, hey, make that happen. But I don't think there were reasons necessarily for everything.
Oh, goodness, I so disagree. But we'll get into that.
From there, the lieutenant decides that he's a traffic cop in a suit and pulls over a couple of underage girls joyriding in the driver's dad's car. He tells Jersey Girl passenger to pull her skirt down so he can see her ass and tells Jersey Girl driver to make faces like she's performing fellatio. He jerks off while they do those things outside the car, then he leaves. This scene was just over 8 uncomfortable minutes long. Jersey Girl driver is played by Eddie Daniels, and Jersey Girl passenger is played by Bianca Hunter,
who I saw in Serpico when she was a 3-year-old child. I have absolutely, I guess she was Serpico's baby or something. I have no memory whatsoever, but IMDb said it was there, so I'm saying that's the truth.
The next day, the lieutenant goes to the church where the rape happened. He examines the crime scene and bags some evidence. Then he overhears some church, media, and detective types questioning the nun who isn't talking. Then the lieutenant sits in his car, listening to the radio, and hears that the Mets have won another game. He takes his gun out, shoots the radio, and puts his teardrop light on the roof, turns on his siren, and angry cries driving around Manhattan yelling profanities.
Yes, and is that where he uses the big word?
Probably.
At Daryl Strawberry.
Now we're at this ceremony for the lieutenant's daughter's first act of symbolic ritual cannibalism. The lieutenant is standing next to one of his betting buddies, the only one who knows what the lieutenant is really trying to do, and the lieutenant's connection to a mob-backed bookie. Lieutenant says he's going double or nothing on the Dodgers next game, and his buddy thinks he's insane. Later, the lieutenant eavesdrops on the nun giving her confession for the sin of, checks notes, being raped. She says that the perpetrators are good boys who go to that Catholic school, and she feels an unbelievably misogynistic obligation to protect them.
Yeah, there is a lot there.
Some of it is going to be the end clip.
Well, I'm not even going to get into what they say. It's just like this whole idea I've been abused and now, but they're good boys. And which, let's face it, a lot of clergy have heard boys do bad things and say they're good boys. So I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility this would happen, although it happened to her. Usually that could happen to someone else, and they say, oh, they're still good boys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I guess the foundation of the religion must be misogynistic, because I got the impression she wanted to be Mary, right? I mean, I think that was the stand-in, or I think that's the idea that seems to be going through her head, that these, even though they take, and they're rude, it's okay, because I forgive them, and it's about forgiveness, and I've transcended all these mortal coils. I mean, I that's the thing I got out of why she was doing what she was doing.
I'm just going to play the clip at the end of the show and let people decide what the hell they want to do with it, because I don't want to think, I can't stress this enough. This movie, I hate this movie, Joe, a lot. I hate this more than Blue Velvet.
You just don't like any movie where a guy's jerking off.
No, that's not true. I wasn't anywhere near this hard on American Pie.
Oh, that's true.
At home, LT does a line off some family photos of the First Communion. Aunt whoever the fuck spots him and says nothing. Then he tucks in his kids, who are already asleep, so they don't know he's doing that.
They have no idea what he's up to. This is just an aside. It's really not that important, but it's really weird. Why would they make this woman an aunt? She's so old. She could be like the grandmother.
It's a question, Joe. I'm not sure that one's good.
No, I'm not saying it's a good question. I know it's not really relevant to the plot. It's just weird. Like, they have this really older lady. Why make it the aunt? Just say it's someone's mother.
Then the lieutenant is at a bar when the Mets win the 6th game of the series. He wanders down the street and runs into an apparent old buddy. They have some drinks and do some coke. Then the lieutenant goes to meet up with his betting cop buddy. He says he wants to go double or nothing again, and his buddy is out. Lieutenant is now on his own. He can call the mob bookie himself because he's about $120,000 in the hole. So the lieutenant stops by JC's place to pick up his money. JC, who is helping his siblings with their homework, invites him in and has him sit on the couch. JC's mother is sitting there too. She affirms to him, in English, the only English she'll speak, that yes, the Dodgers will win the next game. JC brings out the $30,000 in a decorated cigar box. He walks LT to the door, tells him to be careful, like in a really kind and concerned way, and then sends him away.
Yeah, that's another weird relationship, because he does seem to care, and you have to wonder why.
Well, I mean, JC, he's a drug dealer, but, he might just be a nice guy who cares.
But why would he care about this particular person who's done, as far as we know, nothing for him? Unless he has, and we just don't have.
He's his supplier.
Is his supplier enough to actually care what happens to him? I guess.
I mean, he brings him copious quantities of high-quality cocaine to sell. And presumably, JC gets to keep some of that.
I presume, yes. But I should probably have piped in about this before. Everyone understands he's not being a dick when he says LT or Lieutenant. That he has no name.
This is in the TV tropes category of unnamed protagonists.
All right.
The LT makes his way, stumbling with his gun drawn, to the street and then to Ariane's place. She's asleep, but he's coked out of his mind and she has a phone, so he calls the mob guy. The mob guy wants his money. Lieutenant is belligerent, so the mob guy tells him to meet in front of Penn Station after the game tomorrow, and they'll both bring the money that they'd be owing each other. It's not going to work out well for the lieutenant.
Yeah, you think the lieutenant would know better, but then maybe he's just so high, he has no idea what's going on.
So the lieutenant goes back to Zoe's heroin spa. In addition to the drugs, she gives him a character motivation speech that she basically wrote and memorized right before the scene was shot.
Vampires are lucky. They can feed on others. We gotta eat away at ourselves. We gotta eat our legs. We got the energy to walk. We gotta come so we can go. We gotta suck ourselves off. We gotta eat away at ourselves till there's nothing left but appetite. Give and give and give crazy. The gift that makes sense ain't worth it. Jesus said 70 times 7. No one will ever understand why you did it. They'll just forget about you tomorrow. But you gotta do it.
What the fuck does that have to do with anything in this movie, Joe?
Actually, if you listen to some of what she said about giving away your body and eating, that seems to be back to the religious thing of communion and Jesus and et cetera, et cetera. So I got some of that. Some of it was obviously just babble, or at least it was babble to me. I mean, if it had any other meanings, I didn't catch it. Also, she does say one thing that also the nun also says about giving. So there's also that in there about giving and they take. I don't know if it means anything, but she does say something the nun also says.
Yeah, because Zoe Lund thought it was some transcendent character motivation garbage that he had to hear in order to do the things that he does next. I strongly disagree with that, but she's dead, so whatever.
Well, it doesn't change whether you agree with it or not, or death or non-death.
Yeah, but I can't argue that with her.
You never would have if she was alive. Like coming over to your house. How well do you think we know the people whose movies we're watching?
I don't know. Might have gone back on Twitter just to do that. Who knows? So the lieutenant is banking on the $50,000 reward to help pay his debt to the mob, so he goes back to the church to try and convince the nun to name the suspects.
The cops don't get reward money. You make an arrest in
Well, no,
the case.
the Catholic Church is offering the reward.
No, understood.
So he could actually accept the reward.
He couldn't by the rules of the police department. He would not be allowed.
He can't do a lot of the shit he does by the rules of the police department. He doesn't care about the rules of the police department.
Correct, but this is in public. He's not getting that 50 grand.
He knows how to launder money. She refuses to name the suspects, saying that she has forgiven them. She implores the lieutenant to seek forgiveness for himself and leaves him where she'd been praying on the floor near the altar. And there, at the altar, the lieutenant curses and rages against a god that would watch evil be done and do nothing to prevent it. You know, the problem of evil. Then the lieutenant stops doing that. Why? Because, and I cannot stress this enough, so much that I messaged this to No Illusions of God-awful movies, that this is at its core a Christian movie. The lieutenant stops being a Facebook atheist circa 2003 and asks his own forgiveness. Then he hallucinates Jesus Christ himself standing in the aisle, looking all bloody and whatnot. The lieutenant grovels, begs, and crawls his way over to the figure, then kisses Jesus' feet. When the lieutenant looks up, he doesn't see Jesus. He sees a black woman holding the stolen chalice.
Every time I've looked up, I've seen a black woman. When I look for Jesus, my mom helped me out a lot. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I don't know why I thought that was kind of amusing to me that he's like kissing at the feet of Jesus. Suddenly looks over, there's a black woman up there. But I obviously this is him supposedly coming back to reality now. And like, oh, Jesus, I presume I took this as Jesus is not helping him out by helping him solve this case. That's the way I took that. But from a personal level, it's like, yeah, I would imagine when I need help, it wasn't Jesus, it was usually a black woman.
The rapists brought the chalice into her husband's pawn shop to sell, and she recognized it as belonging to her church, so she brought it back. I was Catholic. I could not pick out the chalice belonging to our church out of a lineup. That never would have happened.
Well, to be fair, they do know a crime was committed there, so they probably figure like, well, maybe this is related to that. Also, this is,
but that's not what she said. She said she recognized that chalice because it's from her church.
Well, because the boys came in to sell the chalice, right?
Yeah, but she recognized the chalice as belonging to her church.
Yeah.
Not that two rapists were going to be selling a chalice at some point, because they didn't really release that information.
Well, I don't know what they did or did not release, but I just think they knew there was a crime in the church. It doesn't seem that ridiculous, that's all. Jesus Christ being in the church is far more ridiculous than the fact that she figured out the chalice, okay?
She even knows the boys who brought it in, and they live in a crack house across the street from the church. In that crack house, the lieutenant finds Julio and Paulo watching the final game of the series. He handcuffs them together, then smokes crack, his crack, the quality stuff, with them as the Mets win the final game of the series. He doesn't react to that at all. He does take the two rapists at gunpoint to his car. Julio is played by Fernando Velez. It's the only thing he's ever done. And Paulo is played by Joseph Michael Cruz. Only thing he's ever done. And I don't blame either of these guys for never acting in anything again, because if this is your only experience and you were those characters, fuck acting. So he takes them in the car, and along the way he scolds and berates them. He's reckless with how he points his firearm at them and decries the sacredness of the nun that they raped rather than the fact of the rape itself.
Which doesn't actually make any sense, because at the beginning, he says, at the beginning when this process started, he says, after the church is a racket, or in addition to that, a lot of girls get raped in this town, and one woman wears a penguin suit and the church suddenly cares.
Yep.
So he doesn't think the nun being raped is sacred. At least the character at the beginning of the movie didn't.
Well, he's not that character anymore. We're about to find out.
I guess he's changed. He's grown somehow in the few minutes we've been watching.
Changed. I wouldn't say grown, but he has changed. They arrive in Manhattan at the Port Authority bus terminal. He takes them down to the westbound buses and tells them that they're getting on a bus because their lives aren't worth anything in New York. He even gives them the $30,000 in the cigar box. He does all of this because he forgives them, because the nun forgave them. They get in the bus and it drives off. The lieutenant screams like Luke finding out that Vader is his dad.
Again, another scene with a lot to process. Why would he let the rapist go? You can forgive someone and still think they need to be punished for what they've done.
Yep.
Pitting them on a bus with 30 grand probably didn't teach them the right lesson about rape.
Correct.
Also, grant he's high himself, so I guess he's not thinking straight. That 30 is going to go right up their arms.
Yep.
Or lungs, whatever drug they're using that week.
Good points, Joe. The lieutenant drives himself to Penn Station, which, if you don't know, sits right below Madison Square Garden, where the mob boss said, hey, meet me outside of there. He parks outside the 7th Avenue entrance like an asshole. It's where cabs are supposed to go. Then the bookie pulls up, shoots the lieutenant dead, and speeds off. The end.
The end. He says, hey, cop. Because the guy earlier, the lieutenant said, when he was berating him on the phone, to say, hey, I'm a cop. Do what I want. Yeah. And he goes, oh, you're a cop? Okay. Yeah, sure. Hey, cop. Bam.
Also, when he was talking to his buddy in the bar, he was like, I've been dodging bullets since I was 14. Nothing can kill me.
Yes, that's right. Which is the most we ever find out about his background. I really don't know anything about this character.
No, all we know from start to finish about this is that he's a bad lieutenant.
He is a very bad lieutenant. Or an average lieutenant, depending on how you look at it.
Yep.
Is he really that much different from all the other lieutenants? An argument could be made, no, he's not that. Not all that bad compared to the others. Hey, at least he doesn't shoot any black people. That's an accomplishment, right?
Like I said, he let 2 go.
Yeah. Okay, George, does it still work?
No.
And why not?
No. It's horribly exploitive, and it's a Christian movie based on the idea that forgiveness is redemptive, which itself is a problem, because forgiveness is leveraged as a weapon to make victims continue to be victims. Forgiveness should only ever be for the self. If you want to forgive somebody because you want to move past what they did to you, by all means forgive them. But for that forgiveness to be mandated from outside, that's abusive and manipulative. And fuck it. This movie enjoyed just rolling around in the gutter in ways that were just horrible.
Okay, well, I have to see where I am on this, because I'm sort of on the fence. Let's see where I fall as I talk this out with myself and with you. All right, the reason I might think that this still works, even though the character's not good. Terrific acting job by Harvey Keitel. I think if you think of this as a religious movie, then this hits all the buttons that you would want. But then I think, what kind of religious people want to watch this movie? Because it is rough stuff. So I'm confused about who this is. I do think it's very much a Catholic film. I think it has all the tropes about the eating of the bodies. He even goes to communion. They have the whole thing with him, obviously in the church, and Jesus is there during the whole major event in the picture. So on that level, I think it works as that type of picture. It's not something I would want to see again. Yeah, and then I said, if for no other reason the acting is spectacular, this is a one-person film, basically. No other, even though he has no name himself, no one else is in it. He's on, I think, through the entire picture. There's no point we're watching where he's not on screen. So it's really Keitel's picture. I think if you like Harvey Keitel, if you want to see some strong acting, I think this does it. So I would say it still works.
Okay, I'm not going to argue with you because I don't want to think about this movie anymore.
This was a Patron's Choice episode.
Thank you, patrons. 6-4, you voted for this.
And the poll for next month's film is already up on Patreon. The choices are The Right Stuff, 1983, Eyes Wide Shut, 1999, and My Dinner with Andre, 1981. What's that doing in there? I don't know. If you want to vote but are not a patron, you can fix that by becoming one at patreon.com/DTSWpod. Now, George, what's up next?
Next week, as I hinted earlier, we will be talking about Bam, Pow, Thwack, Batman from 1966. Which isn't in that movie anywhere because that was the theme song to the TV show.
Correct, but that's still what I think of. So I guess that's it for this episode. I'm Joe Dixon. Thanks for listening.
And I'm George Romaka. Thanks for listening, indeed, because if a podcast drops and there's no one around to hear it, it's just another collection of ones and zeros that doesn't matter.
I could tell you their names now, and I know that you are bound by a sacred vow to keep my secret. But I cannot tell you their names, for I too am bound. Jesus turned water to wine. I ought to have turned bitter semen into fertile sperm, hatred to love, and maybe to have saved their souls. They did not love me, but I ought to have loved them.
You've been listening to Does This Still Work? Produced by Joe Dixon and George Romaka. The hosts can be reached via social media, email, or the contact page at dtswpod.com. Be good to yourself and others, because that still works.
I said hard on.
Yes, you did. George, is there a difference between the truth and a fact?
If you could have a lifetime supply of anything, what would it be?
Have you ever tried a Cosmopolitan and did you like it?
What's the weirdest thing you wanted to be when you grew up?
George, in an attempt to be more inclusive, should the Academy Awards drop the Best Actress category and just be Best Actor? I should amend this. Should they drop the male and female categories altogether?
If you were the ruler of the world, who would be your top advisor? And I'm going to amend this and clarify it. Like, not just who, but like, what is the thing that you would most want advice in?